Welcome to Hartman Math. This is lesson 2.9, the quadratic formula. It's our fourth and final way of solving quadratic equations. To recap, we've got factoring, square roots, completing the square. Kind of none of those is a good idea. It's kind of our last resort, the quadratic formula. We've got a lot of students that like it because it's pretty straightforward. It's just got a lot of calculations and simplifying. So I would have a calculator ready as we work along. Here is the quadratic formula. Please pay attention to the details. X equals, notice that we have a very long fraction bar. So one of the common errors is to have the fraction bar only be this part, not out here. That would be a mistake. The fraction bar goes all the way across. All of this is on top, all of this is on the bottom. We have the opposite of b, kind of like we're doing standard form quadratic functions, trying to find the axis of symmetry. So you might even notice that opposite of b divided by 2a part. That is part of it. But anyway, opposite of b plus or minus square root. Underneath the long square root, we've got b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. To get it set up, we do need to recognize and identify a and b and c. Like factoring, before we're ready, we've got to get it equal to 0. So then we can do the a, b, and c. So example number 1. It's equal to 0. It's ready to go for quadratic formula if we want to. If we think about this as far as what would be actually the best way of attacking this one, we might try factoring first. 2 sets of parentheses. I just don't think it's going to work out. To make the negative 9, it's going to have to be x plus 1, x minus 9, or something like that, but that's not going to give us 3x. X plus 3x minus 3, we know that's a difference of squares, so we're not going to get any x's in the middle, so factoring doesn't work. And if this b value had been even, completing the square is the easiest way to go. Dividing this by 2 and squaring is going to kind of create a little bit of a mess. It may not be worth it. So let's go straight to the quadratic formula. We do want to identify our a and our b and our c. All of those are numbers. So kind of think about that. What are those values? A is 1, b is positive 3, and c is negative 9. So we're going to insert and substitute those in to the quadratic formula. A, B, and C. So here we go into the quadratic formula. We had it from before. So x is the opposite of b. So that would be negative 3 plus or minus. Always a good idea to use parentheses when we substitute. I'll tell you where you want to use your calculator after we get this set up. B squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2 times a. Where you want to use your calculator is in the part underneath the square root sign. You don't need to press the square root button, just this part right here. So on your calculator, parentheses 3 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 9. Hit equals only at the very end. It's going to tell you 45. So there's a good chance that this is going to be our answer right here. Still the long fraction bar, everything on top or on the bottom, x equals. But with square roots, we always got to wonder, can we simplify? And remember our practice on simplifying the square roots, we're looking for, is there a perfect square? It's a factor of the 45, like 9. 9 is. So we want to break that up into square root 9, square root 5. And then take the square root of 9, that's 3. I think that's as far as we can go. What you want to watch out for as far as simplifying, and there are different ways, but we want to look at this number that's outside the root, because if there isn't, then you would have been done, and this number on the bottom, all 3. If all 3 are divisible by a single number, we should reduce it. We don't have that, so we're done at that point, those are our two solutions. We've got x equals negative 3 plus the square root 3 root 5 all over 2, negative 3 minus 3 square root 5 all over 2. Two different solutions. Example number 2. Again, we could try factoring, just a thought. Parentheses, 3x, 1x, not a lot of options for the plus 1, so it's going to have to be 3x minus 1, x minus 1, but that's not going to create negative 6x. It's really our only options, so it doesn't factor by our normal techniques. Being that it starts with a 3 that is not divisible into everything, I don't think I want to do the complete the square. Since it has the x, I don't want to do the square root method. So we're going to go quadratic formula. So a is 3, b is negative 6, c is positive 1. That goes into our quadratic formula. Remember on top it starts with the opposite of b, so you can write negative 6, but it's just better to write the opposite of that is positive 6. Gotta have the parentheses here. If you're using a calculator and you do not use the parentheses, it's going to think that you mean this to be negative 36. We know negative 6 squared is positive 36. So using calculator, the parentheses are really important there. Always use them is a good idea, but definitely for any negative numbers. So it is time for that calculator. Don't worry about the square root. We'll take care of that later. Do this part on the calculator. Negative 6 in parentheses squared minus 4 times 3 times 1. What do you get? 24. So maybe that's our answer. I wouldn't want to reduce this without wondering what happens here. So if that was like 23 where I know that I can't simplify at all, I would just box my answer here and say that I'm done. But we should simplify or break down the square root of 24. What perfect square is a factor of 24? 4. We're going to break that down into 4 and 6 inside square roots. Square root 4, square root 6. What is the square root of 4? 2. Now, can we reduce? Can we simplify? We are going to look, again, has to be all three. There, and there. Those three, not ever inside. Those three. What number divides into all of those? 2. So we're going to divide by 2, divide by 2, divide by 2. When I divide this one by 2, I do get 1 at that point. Since it's part of multiplication, it is not necessary to write that one. That's as far as we can go. We're going to box that answer. Let me pause the video here. Try this one. You play when you're ready. Kind of looks like it might be factorable, although we are practicing the quadratic formula today. 2x and x, and we can move around the minus 7 to plus 1. I think it's going to work out. So I think this is definitely a quadratic formula problem. So a is going to be negative, b is going to be negative 1. So the opposite of negative 1 is positive 1, plus or minus b squared minus 4 times the a times the c. There's a lot of negatives there. So when you get to that point on your calculator, let's be careful. So on the calculator, type in this, not the square root, but this, exactly the way you see it. Let's see what we get. Should have gotten 57, which is not a prime number. But as far as are there any perfect squares that go into this? And it's an odd number, so it'd have to be odd. So we could skip 4, go to 9. 9 doesn't. 25 certainly doesn't. 49. And then already we're too big, so that's can't be simplified, which means that's the answer. We'll box that and we're done. Example number 3, solve. Ooh, this one is not ready. Gotta equal 0 if we're doing the quadratic formula or factoring. And just like factoring, it is harder if your coefficient for the x squared term is negative. So we don't really want this here. Let's undo. Let's move this. So let's add 4x squared, add 5x. Let's get the left side to be 0. We could try factoring. Ooh, I don't think it's going to work. A, B, C. Here we go. So the opposite of B is negative 5 plus or minus square root of 5 squared minus 4 times negative 10. Again, it's got some negatives there. On the bottom, we got 2 times 4. We know that's going to be 8. So careful there. Here's our calculator work right there. Let's type that in. Verify that you're going to get 185. There are no perfect squares, aside from one, which doesn't help, are factors of the 185. That means if we can't simplify the root, you are done at that point. Since we simplified here, 2 times 4 is 8. There it is. Here's our last U try. Once again, pause until you're ready to check your answers. And another one that we got to get equal to 0. I do like the positive over here. Let's not mess with this. Let's get the other side to be 0. Minus 8x, add 2, ready for the quadratic formula. Negative 8 squared with the parentheses, minus 4 times 3 times 2 is the square root of 40. 2 times 3 is 6. Don't worry about reducing here yet. It only matters if we can do something with this. I think we can. What perfect square evenly divides into 40? The bigger the better. I think 4 is as good as we're going to get. So square root 4 times square root 10. And the square root of 4 is 2. Now we're going to look there, there, and there. What number goes into all three? We're going to divide them all by 2. Divide by 2. Divide by 2. Divide by 2. There's our answer. And that's it for today. I'll see you next time.